Okay, I'm here to talk about boredom and stress eating, one of the favorite topics ever. And I'm going to go into a little detail here, a little more detail than usual, but I want you to think about this that avoiding the overeating, binging behavior, whatever form it manifests in your life, it buys back your time. And not just from the act of overeating, that time spent, but less time feeling guilty, a little shame, or even disgust. So let's jump into this. So, what this is really about, going a little deeper, and don't worry so much about the deep dive science unless you're interested, it's about rewiring your brain. So, if someone succumbs to overeating, binging, overindulging, there's a problem with the dopamine system. So, as you can see here, there's a little analogy. When we do overeat, about 50% of our dopamine receptors are accessed. It's no joke. Sex is there just as a comparison, that's about 100%. And that would go for other more addictive substances as well. So, with this, even if you consciously want to stop, what you have to understand is that your brain, it can be wired this way. So it's a matter of literally rewiring your brain and rewiring this response system. And I'll get into this a little later about how those effects actually diminish. All right, so this is the behavior loop, habit loop, trigger loop. There's different names for it, but I want you to really think about how this applies to you as usual. So you can see at the top of this cycle is the trigger. So that can be a stress response, that can be an I just can't response where things are just building up even vaguely throughout your day. It can be due to anxiety, to fear, anger, sadness. It's always a combination of emotions, or just mild depression or whatever you're dealing with, usually on a day in, day out basis. So that's the trigger. And then the behavior that it cues is our automatic unconscious behavior that's associated with this habit loop. So for some people, that's smoking. For some people, that's having a couple of stiff drinks at the end of the night. We're talking about overeating or randomized snacking and that sort of thing. So it's on autopilot. And then the reward is that pleasure, and I would say more often than not, it's just the relief that you're seeking, that you're experiencing from this habit loop and from the original trigger. So as you can see, this isn't the best way to actually deal with the trigger and what's starting the cycle in the first place, what's creating the loop, because that reward automatically builds and lends an item to that trigger list and can contribute in the form of even mild. Now, I'm not talking about like debilitating guilt or shame, or even like mild disgust that you might feel. So that's why this is really important to just kind of think about how it applies to you and understand. And what I want to add on to this is when you repeat this loop over and over again, even if it's semi-sporadic, like an every other day thing, an every 3-day thing, the pattern starts to emerge. And there's also the element of diminishing returns. So the same, and I'm not trying to say that it's exactly the same as doing illicit drugs, but think about someone who starts off doing something as terrible as like cocaine. In the beginning, it takes a very small amount to get that reward, and then gradually that person has to increase the amount over and over again, time and time again, in order to get the same benefit and the same dopamine release. So the same thing happens with food. If someone has a bad relationship with food, I try to stay away from good, bad, but you know what I mean. If they engage in this binging behavior on a regular basis, so more and more is required, more sugar is required, more calorie dense stuff is required to get that same reward, and it just doesn't fill that void. It doesn't fill that hole nearly as well as it used to. So what I want to end this with is a challenge, and I want to challenge the concept of boredom eating. If someone is bored, that is not a justification to deal with this. And by justification, I mean that's not the real reason why someone randomly eats or overeats. There's something that they're not dealing with, some emotion, some feeling. It could just be a tangible thing that they need to deal with, like pay a bill that they've been procrastinating with, anything like that. Can even be a minor thing. So there's no such thing as boredom eating. But that on a deeper level still, it means that someone is trying to fill a hole because they are lacking meaning. Because I want you to think about how this applies to you again. If you are just so happy with the direction your health is headed, with where your life's at, you're engaged in your purpose, you don't feel the need to overeat or to binge. It's just not or to smoke or whatever. There is a physical element to this of being like some people are addicted to sugar, but it's really it all starts here in the brain. So this is what we call liminal thinking. So just going deep on a topic and getting such a great education with it that you're able to understand it and overcome it. Because the best way to stop is to stop. And that ultimately defeats the cycle. Now, for specific tactics that you need to do on a daily basis and that sort of thing, that needs to come through more one-on-one coaching, and then I can, replacing an unhealthy treat with Halo Top ice cream or something like that. But that's not as important as you fully grasping this topic. So I hope this really helps you. Let me know if you have questions about this. Woo!